Hey guys, this is Noah for BlazeKick.com, and I'm here today with my The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Q&A and impressions video. I was able to play the game a couple weeks ago in New York City at Nintendo New York after Nintendo's E3 Treehouse event, and so I'm here to talk about what I thought about the game. Some of you guys sent me questions on Twitter, so I'll be able to answer those, and I've got some of my raw impressions as well, but we're going to start with the Q&A portion. So first off, how was the frame rate? For the most part, I felt like the frame rate was okay. I mean, it was mostly a steady 30, or at least what looked like it to me. The main times when it dropped were during combat and when there were things like explosions or fire happening on screen, but they quickly came back to steady levels. Hoping that in the next 9 months of development for the game, for both the Wii U and NX versions, they're able to improve the frame rate a little bit to keep it at a more steady 30. Hopefully, at least on the NX version, we get a steady 30 with minimal dips. How long did it take to get used to things like switching weapons and clothing? So in terms of the inventory system in this game, it's kind of different from the other Zelda games in the past recent years, because those games have had a touchscreen-based inventory where you just drag things around. This time it's all happening on the TV. The gamepad is not used for inventory management. And I actually found it to be very easy. There are sort of two types of menus you can go to. You have a quick select menu, which you can access by holding a direction on the D-pad and then cycling through using the right stick, as well as your main menu, which you can bring up with the pause button and it takes up the entire screen. I felt like both were very easy to navigate, very simple, so no worries there. How are the walking controls compared to Twilight Princess or other open world games? Walking was something I didn't really notice how it felt, so I guess that's a good thing, because that means it feels like previous Zelda titles. It didn't really stand out as weird or different, so I guess that is a good sign that it is similar to previous Zelda titles. Are the colors vibrant or faded? Both. I mean, I feel like this is a game with a very strong art style. It's very confident in expressing that art style, and I feel like when the game needs to be bright, it is bright. Like, you have very bright fields of grass, very, very bright fire and explosions. But if you look at things like old ruins, like the Temple of Time, these worn-out buildings, they do look kind of washed out, but I think that's on purpose. So the game has I think, a good blend of brighter and darker tones, and I think it all meshes together very well. Any theories on why Hyrule is in ruins? So I personally think this game takes place after Wind Waker on the Zelda timeline, which means that after the Great Sea sort of drained, all these buildings that have been under it for so long have sort of become dilapidated. So that's why I think the world looks how it does. Additionally, a couple other reasons I think the game takes place after Wind Waker. We can see the Koroks right away in the demo, those little leaf dudes which give you the seeds. They're present in, I believe, the only other game they're in, I think, is Wind Waker. I could be wrong on that. And also the king, well, the old man in the demo, people have said he looks a lot like the King of Hyrule from the Wind Waker, so there's another possible connection. How is the game's focus on adventure versus action versus graphics? So I personally think the graphics in this game, as beautiful as they are, sort of take a backseat to everything else because the action and adventure in this game just feels so amazing. For me, the sense of adventure really harkens back to the original Zelda titles where you can go anywhere, do anything. I know that's what a lot of people have been saying, and it might be sort of like a cliche at this point, but I really feel like it's true. Like, during my experience playing the game, I wanted to explore, you know? Like, even during the portions where I was supposed to be doing something story-related, I just completely went against that and just ran in all directions trying to climb things and looking around, seeing where I can go. So there's definitely a big sense of adventure permeating the world. As for the action, it's pretty different from previous Zelda titles in some ways, but similar in others. So, the combat, in terms of the weapon system is pretty different this time around. Not only do weapons break pretty easily, but there's a greater weapon diversity. So yes, in previous Zelda titles you could pick up enemy weapons like clubs and spears, but the thing is, you couldn't hold on to them for very long. As soon as you would go into a different room, they would just be gone. This time you can store them in your inventory, as a real weapon, not just as like a temporary item. So the combat feels a lot more varied because of it. The weapons do feel very different. Like, the things like the club and the hammer do feel much slower than the sword, powerful but slow. So I do think that action in this game is very unique and very fun, and I feel like the game does a great job blending the action and the adventure. So you'll spend a lot of time wandering, and if you want to seek out more encounters, you can, but you can also just spend a lot of time being peaceful and just exploring the world. It's up to you as the player. Which features in the game seem like mods? So at first I was going to say the fire feature and the magnesis, but now I'm just going to say the magnesis, and here's why. I think the magnesis is different from anything we've seen in a Zelda game before. The fact you can manipulate things in the air, I don't think we've ever seen something in a Zelda game to that degree. And we've now seen some of the crazy things you can do with it, like there's been a recent video that came out where you can, like, catapult Link if he's standing on a board and you drop a boulder on the other end of the board. Like, that's insane. There's never been anything like that in the series. And so I think for that reason, it does feel a little bit like a mod just because of how ridiculous it is. It almost feels out of place at first, you get used to it eventually. Well, something like the fire, as unique as it does feel to the Zelda series, it feels like this world was kind of built with a fire in mind. And that's not to say the magnesis feels too out of place. The fire just feels so organic and it feels so well suited to this world. So, if anything feels like a mod, I would say it's the magnesis feature. How many hours of your life will you lose to this game? A lot. I was originally thinking before we were shown that I was going to 100% it, but now that's out of the picture now that we've seen how big the game is. But I will still put a lot of hours into this game, hopefully at least 100, maybe more, we'll see. Is the wind's breath nasty? It's the nastiest. How do the graphics compare to the live stream? So, I find that pretty much with any game, it looks better when you're playing it on the TV directly from the system, and I feel like this game is no exception. I mean, I feel like the colors look slightly better, the frame rate looks noticeably better, so as a whole, it does look better on the system than it does in a live stream. Okay, now I'm going to move on to some of my raw impressions. Things I noticed while playing the game which stood out to me. So first of all, you can drown while swimming, and I don't mean underwater. I mean, that's always been a thing, but now, if you're even swimming on the surface of a lake, here's what I encountered anyway. Not sure if this will always be applicable, but I was swimming across the surface of a lake, and all of a sudden I just died. I was confused. Was there an enemy? There was no enemy that I saw, and so the Nintendo rep there told me that because my stamina meter had run out, I had drowned. I thought that was very interesting, because it might have been in Skyward Sword, but I don't think it was. To the best of my knowledge, you could swim infinitely on the surface in Skyward Sword, and now, it looks like the swimming in this game is kind of limited, which, mixed feelings on that. I mean, I'm sure I'll get used to it. It's just another thing we have to be more careful about when playing. Another thing I was noticing, which feels different about the combat, is that the arrows in this game feel very different when you're shooting your bow and arrow. In previous Zelda games like Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, your arrows, when you're looking through the first-person viewfinder, they shoot directly straight. Just directly to your target, you're going to hit it every time if you have your shots lined up. But in this game, the arrows sort of curve down based on the gravity and the wind in the game. So you're going to have to be more careful when planning your shots. It's going to make arrows, I guess, more meaningful. You're going to want to hold on to them and be more considerate, I guess. Next, the climbing. The climbing is something that really stood out to me in this game, from the first trailer to actually being able to play it. It just opens up a huge sense of freedom in this Zelda world. Like, previous Zelda games have felt very restrictive, just because there's basically no verticality, except when you climb a ladder. And even then, I mean, it's very slow, it's very basic, but now the fact that you can climb virtually anything in this world opens up so many possibilities. Obviously, there's still going to be some limitations based on your stamina, but there are going to be food options to temporarily boost your stamina for things like climbing. I just thought it was so fun. I was able to climb the Temple of Time, I climbed cliffs, I climbed trees, I just had such a blast climbing, and I cannot wait to do even more of it in the final game. So, as for the enemies in this game, they felt a little bit smarter than previous games. In previous Zelda games, you can sort of run into a group of enemies, go slashing, just being a little bit careful, but it's very easy to take out even the strongest of enemies. This time around, it felt a little bit different. It felt like the enemies had more of a plan, and they were making better use of their surroundings and the weapons in their camps. So, as you guys have probably seen in the gameplay demos, these enemies are in their little encampments all the time, and so they'll usually be eating, hanging out, or chatting until they see you. And that's when they all grab their weapons and they run to you and attack. Now, some of them will grab a bow and arrow, some will grab a club, sword, whatever it may be. To me, the thing that was interesting, there was an instance where I was running into an enemy encampment. I realized I was not well equipped, and I started running out. And all of a sudden, the bokoblins in the area, they started picking up stones and chasing after me while throwing the stones at me. I didn't actually get hit, but I actually thought that was very interesting, that the enemies now have much more diverse behavior in the world. Additionally, I thought the ragdoll physics for Link and the enemies in this game were very amusing. There was a point where I was trying to scale a cliff wall, but it was just too high. I could not make it, so I ran out of stamina. Well, and before running out, I decided I was going to jump off the wall, because I had a better chance of surviving it jumping. Maybe I could catch a tree or something, rather than just dropping down. So as I jumped, of course I hit the ground, and when Link hits the ground, he's contorted into just like a Link pretzel, and I thought that was absolutely hilarious, because I've never seen anything like that in a Zelda game. I laughed so many times playing this just because of how many new, crazy, unexpected things there were. I loved seeing the new physics. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the controls. The controls in this game, aside from the walking, which I mentioned earlier, were pretty different in terms of the button layout. So one thing to note is that the bow and arrow was always set to ZR, so you don't set it to X or Y, it's at ZR. You can still use the gyro controls in the gamepad. I was very happy about that. I was kind of worried that wasn't going to be in there. Additionally, the face buttons are now very different. So previously, B was always your sword attack, but now that's actually assigned to the Y button, X is jump, and B is to sprint. I forget what A is. It's, I guess, just interacting with items, maybe picking things up. So I thought it was very interesting that Y was attack and X, obviously jump, is something that's brand new to 3D Zelda games. So it's definitely going to take some adjusting, but interesting change, interesting to note. Another thing I noticed is that the game has auto-saving, because one of the many times I died, and I died at least 5 times in this 40-minute demo, I think when I died it said something like return to last autosave, and I said yes, which I thought was interesting because, I mean, Zelda games have sort of had checkpoints before, but there's never really been auto-saving, and to see it mentioned like that makes me think that this game's saving system will be completely different. I kind of hope it is. I think it's a little bit funny that you still have to save, because auto-saving is sort of like a standard, I think, for today's games, at least in my opinion, so I'm glad to see autosave might be in the game. That's not really a confirmation, though. I'm just pretty sure it's going to be in there. And last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about what I saw on the gamepad. So a lot of people, myself included, were expecting to see things like a map, the inventory, the viewfinder on the gamepad, but that stuff is all on the TV. The gamepad just displayed the controls, which was actually kind of nice since the controls were very different, as I mentioned before. What was also interesting, there was an option for off-TV play. It said just tap the gamepad to activate off-TV play, which I did. I've not seen anyone talk about this yet, so I did it. I played it for a couple minutes on off-TV play. I wanted most of my time to be on the TV to appreciate the visuals, but the game looked nice on the gamepad. No significant frame drops. I mean, aside from what was already in the game on the TV. Basically, the gamepad didn't affect performance. Obviously, there's going to be a hit in visual quality when you're going to that smaller, lower resolution screen, but off-TV play is in the game. Alright, well that about wraps it up for my Q&A and impressions for The Legend of Zelda: The Breath of the Wild. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you have any other questions. I'll be able to answer them in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and be sure to subscribe for BlazeKick for more video content. Thanks.